Okay, we'll call this council meeting to order at 6 p.m. We've got a couple of items. First of all, if anybody's having trouble reading the agenda on the screen, there are some printed copies at the end of the table. Feel free to help yourselves. I'm sure most of you know that National Poetry Day was March the 21st, and National Poetry Month is the whole month of April. And this evening we have Samantha Balch with us, and she's going to be our poet laureate this evening and read us a poem. And the floor is yours, Samantha. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Samantha Balch, and I wrote this poem, so I'm going to read it to you today. If you ever go sailing alone on the sea, 'cause you like big wide spaces and want to be free, and the city has nothing but buildings to see, just remember this story, it happened to me. One day I was walking alone down the street when I looked down and saw a gold coin by my feet. I picked up the coin and I thought, this is neat. Then a funny old stranger I happened to meet. He told me of treasures beyond my best dreams, of silver and gold that sparkles and gleams, and hasn't been found by the best treasure teams, a treasure that's quite hard to find, so it seems. He gave me a map with an X in red ink and told me to follow it if I dare think that I'll find the wealth. Then he turned with a wink and said I must first find a boat that won't sink. So I rented a ship that can sail far and wide and started next day to sail off with the tide. For a day and a year to find treasure I tried, but finding just ocean, I sat down and cried. There was nothing but water around me for days, and the map I had looked at a million new ways, yet nothing at all I could see through this haze, just an endless supply of dull blues, whites, and grays. So I turned round my ship and I started to go back home to the land that I once used to know. But seeing just ocean as sailed my ship so, I realized that this was the tale of my woe. I couldn't tell left and I couldn't tell right. Suddenly I had a terrible fright. I sailed all the day and I sailed all the night, yet nothing but water came into my sight. After I'd sailed for another few years, filling the ocean with all of my tears, I heard distant calls come with joy to my ears, and saw a small boat sailed by men with large spears. Back to their village we sailed for a day, where I found with surprise home was not far away. They gave me some food and a flute I could play, but before I set off they had this left to say. If you ever go sailing alone on the sea, 'cause you like big wide spaces and want to be free, and you're certain someday a fine sailor you'll be, you must first learn your right from your left, goodness me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming out this evening and sharing that original work with us, Samantha. Appreciate that. I need a motion for adoption of minutes.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held at City Hall on Monday, March 12th, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Moved by Councillor Espy and seconded by Councillor Buds. All those in favor? And that's carried. We have one delegation this evening. Wanda McFadden is here from the Assiniboine River Basin Initiative. Wanda, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I have packages for council. Sure. Yeah. Pass it down. Sure. Thank you, Your Worship and Council members. It's a privilege to once again present an update to you on the Assiniboine River Basin Initiative and the work that we've been undertaking over the last couple of years. I think it's been about 2 years since I've been to Council. Many of you are familiar with our organization. We're a water-based organization working across the Assiniboine, Qu'Appelle, and Souris rivers in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and North Dakota. So we work with provincial and state governments as well as municipal governments, commodity organizations, conservation community, and other NGOs looking at water and ways to manage it and from an education and informational point of view and bringing groups together. So we were incorporated in July of 2015, so we're just over 3 years old officially. We held our most recent conference in Regina this past year, our 4th annual. We'll be back in Brandon in February of 2019, so we hope you could join us at that time. Since I last had an opportunity to speak with you, we have moved forward in the development of our framework plan, which will is our document that was put together with input by the stakeholders across the basin, including yourselves. I know His Worship attended some of our first meetings and had input into some of our working sessions. So our framework plan has now become our resource document, our working plan, and one that others can use as well when they're working on water-related matters across the basin. So that has been included in the package for your review, and it's also available electronically on our website. As well, we have firmed up our board of directors. We operate with a board of 51, 17 from each jurisdiction, representing a cross-section of organizations and community people on our board. So we have a diverse stakeholder organization, and I'm pleased to say that Dr. Ellen Preston is our chair. Ellen is a board member here in Manitoba, probably familiar with most of you, in his former role as Assistant Deputy Minister in Agriculture. He's since retired and is engaged in a number of activities, including our board. We have 2 representatives on our executive from Manitoba, 2 from Saskatchewan, and 2 from North Dakota, and they're included in the information for you as well. Since we last spoke, we have had the opportunity to become engaged in a number of projects. The most recent, and one that has just wrapped up, is the hydrogeospheric modeling platform for the entire basin. We worked in partnership with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Agriculture Manitoba, as well as a number of other partner organizations, such as the Manitoba Forage and Grassland Association. This modeling platform is a tool that is available to communities and stakeholders across the basin. It is a 3D modeling tool that will allow you the opportunity to look at flood and drought mitigation and use it in your everyday planning scenarios. So we're pleased that that tool has been recently completed and is available to stakeholders at this point in time. We are taking that tool to the next level with the Environment and Climate Change Canada's announcement of funding for the Lake Winnipeg Basin. We are now going to take that tool to the next step, where we're going to use it for modeling phosphorus and nutrient releases from wastewater treatment plants across the basin, as well as looking at the agricultural impact of phosphorus and nutrient loading in our riparian zones. So that application has gone in, and we're hopeful that it will be successful for funding. But again, that would be a basin-wide initiative that we're looking at doing. Probably one that's closer to home to yourselves, or maybe not, is we recently partnered with the Red River Basin Commission, Manitoba Agriculture, and a couple of other municipalities, as well as conservation districts, in the development of a tile drainage webinar series. Tile drainage on the agricultural landscape continues to grow, and as a result, we put together a 4-series webinar that would assist in educating and informing not just agricultural producers, but also municipalities on this growing initiative out there. As a result, we've now developed a template policy that municipalities asked us to put together, so that if they are looking at putting in a tile drainage policy for applications, it's a tool that will assist them in developing that policy. We've received funding from Lake Winnipeg Foundation to put together a white paper on wastewater treatment standards across the entire basin. So that will be a one-resource document that will be available, we're hoping, by early fall to communities as well. So that one is coming down the pipes as we speak. We're also active with our partners in a number of areas. We've done a number of transboundary meetings. Many of you in this room are probably aware of the frustrations and the concerns that have been raised by agricultural drainage between Manitoba and Saskatchewan and that ongoing issue. We've hosted a couple of meetings in regard to that, where we've brought municipalities along the borders together to learn more about what the policies and procedures are in place in each jurisdiction, so they can become better informed and put some of the coffee shop myths to rest, and also provide them with a resource on who they should contact if they have concerns. We're going to be doing that one along the 49th as well, with the counties in North Dakota and municipalities in both Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So that one is geared for June. So they've asked us if we would do that, so we're going to spearhead that. We've also been active. We supported the Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Sustainable Development last spring when they were doing a tour of the Southwest. We accompanied them at the request of the MLA Doyle Panuke. So we were engaged with those two ministers as they spoke about spring flooding issues in that area. So we continue to support our cabinet ministers here in the province as well by providing them information, not just our provincial cabinet ministers, but also our federal MPs. We meet with them on a regular and ongoing basis. Something that might be closer to home to yourselves is, and I'm sure you're very much aware of it with the Keystone potato producers being here, is the University of Manitoba research that's underway right now with the Assiniboine Delta and revisiting that aquifer and seeing what water resources are available and how it can be allocated. So we are working with that committee on that particular issue as well. We have recently, I see you have a banner here that represents the Indigenous community. We recently worked with the Red River Basin Commission and the Southern Chiefs Organization in a Spirit of Water event that was held in late January in Winnipeg in conjunction with the Red River Basin Commission's conference. Coming out of the Spirit of Water, we signed an MOU with the Southern Chiefs as well as with Red River Basin to work on Indigenous water issues across the province of Manitoba with that group. We're also working with the Turtle Mountain Tribe in North Dakota, and we've started negotiations with the First Nations communities in Saskatchewan. They have places on our board. There's a windows of opportunity for them to participate. So we do have members that are stepping forward and becoming engaged with our board of directors as well. Something that might be of interest to your public works community is we're working with the City of Minot and urban municipalities that are working in wastewater treatment to do a tour of their new wastewater and water treatment facilities in June. As you know, Minot underwent a devastating flood in 2011, and as a result, the City of Minot and the state of North Dakota, along with other cities and counties, are investing over $1 billion to flood-proof the Souris River from Sherbrooke to West Hope. That project is well underway, and one of the initiatives that they are doing, of course, is improvements to the wastewater and water treatment sites. And we have worked with them. We will be doing a intensive tour for wastewater treatment and water treatment operators to take a look at the works that they've been doing and how they've engaged in some of their flooding activities to improve the scenarios. So a learning experience there as they move forward. So we have been active over the last few years. We have been engaged with the City of Winnipeg. They are now on board, the City of Brandon, the City of Verdun in Manitoba, and most of the municipalities, including the arm of St. Francis Xavier, Cartier, and Portage la Prairie are all engaged with us as well. So they have representation and are engaged with our organization. So this is just a very small highlight of some of the activities that we're undertaking. There are a number of others as well as we continue to move forward with our work, but I just wanted to take the time tonight to update you on some of our activities, and I'd gladly answer any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you, Wanda. Did council have any questions for our presenter?
Yes.
Councillor Dreger?
So the floodwaters are a concern always. Do you have a forecast for this year's?
At this point in time, if you visit our website, because we have a Water Watch page on our website that's easy access for you to visit both North Dakota, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba sites, they have just recently bumped it up to normal flood conditions. Having drove the basin over the last week, I've been to Regina and Minot and Belcourt. Very little snow cover, so we expect runoff to be minimal through the Souris and Qu'Appelle basins, just because there is no snow. We also are a member of the International Souris River Board, which is operated by the International Joint Commission. We sit at that table, and they're going through a plan of studies. So the last update we had coming off the Souris was minimal to low impact of flooding, normal. Chalmot Dam, we're an active member of the Chalmot Liaison Dam Committee as well. We have a conference called tomorrow morning. There's more snow in the headwaters of the Assiniboine, but at this point there's still, again, just forecasting normal runoff. So it will depend on rain events. Most of the basin actually is in drought, and North Dakota and Southeast Saskatchewan have still declared themselves a drought. The city of Regina had less snow in June than they did rain, or less snow in January than they had rain in June. So they're still very much in a drought situation. Moose Jaw and several sections of the southeast part of the basin actually had their driest years on record. Yeah, so we're headed into a drought scenario. Again, it depends on rain, but North Dakota declared a drought in about May of last year, and they haven't really come out of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Fraser?
Just in terms, you mentioned flood mitigation efforts, and I know the previous Liberal Party leader was very active in promoting on-land water storage as opposed to simply diking and dredging.
Yeah, so that's one. Okay, so one of the projects we're currently looking at right now, and we're just waiting, I didn't mention it because we're hoping to secure funding, is we're working with the International Institute of Sustainable Development. We've put in an NSERC application to take a look at off-main stem small dam retentions that could be used by producers as well as local communities. So we're hoping we're successful on that. That will be a planning tool that will be then available to communities and farmers that have identified key sites that would be probably most beneficial for small retention to assist both in the drought and the flood situations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Just one from me, Wanda.
Yes.
I think I guess it was over 3 years ago I attended the first meeting in Regina. And at that time there was, the people in the know seemed to be saying that the secret to flood prevention was more retention all the way along the watershed.
Yes.
And the other thing I heard, especially from people from Manitoba, and there were people from Saskatchewan and some from North Dakota, was the lack of regulations in our sister province as far as drainage and that goes. Has there been any progress made on that?
There has been progress made in Saskatchewan. They have introduced their bill, so they no longer grandfather any drainage going back historically. So there's no grandfathering. They have started to work on that front and bringing people back into compliance, irrespective of what year the drainage was put into place. One of the largest factors in the unknowns for us in our basin, of course, is the situation around the Quill Lakes. The Quill Lakes Basin is a terminal or a closed basin, highly saline, even more so than Devil's Lake. It's at a point with excess moisture, a combination of probably excess moisture and some agricultural drainage activities of overflowing. So if that naturally overflows, they're looking at what they call the Cuttawagan diversion. That has been put on hold, but if it overflows, it will naturally flow into Last Mountain Lake and through the Qu'Appelle chain. So that is very much a concern for ourselves as well as the folks along the Qu'Appelle, because that's going to inject highly saline water into the system. So they're looking at some type of diversion that would mitigate that action and take actually fresh water or fresh runoff and divert it through that system. But it has repercussions all along the way. Yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? But Wanda, thank you so much for taking time out and presenting to us this evening on this very important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if there's any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm quite willing to sit down and do one-on-ones as well. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to open the public hearing for variation PC 8-18. This is for Senegal Mercredi. Is there anyone here to speak either in favor of or opposed to the application? Calling once. Anyone here to speak to the motion, to the application? Okay, need a motion to close the public hearing for PC 8-18.
Resolved that the public hearing for variation PC 8-18 Senecal Mercredi 359 Caithness Street, lots 1 2/2, Block 87, Plan 69, Parish of Portage la Prairie now be closed.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Draycott. All those in favor? And that's carried.
This is a request from Ed Senecal, who is building the front deck over at 359 Caithness Street. He is applying for the front yard requirement to be reduced to allow this construction of a front deck, and the measurements are there. Similar variations have been approved by council in the past, and they are listed there. This building is in a R160 residential single-family zone. The application has been circulated to various city departments with no concerns, and public notices have been sent to all property owners within a 100-meter radius. It is the recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie approve the variation request of Ed Senecal, Norbert and Adeline Mercredi to vary the front yard requirement of 7.5 meters to be reduced to 4.8 meters to allow the construction of a front deck measuring 3.96 meters by 6.4 meters at the property known as 359 Caithness Street, which is legally described as lots 1/2, Block 87, Plan 69, Parish of Portage la Prairie, and I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Draycott. Any questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Move into committees. Finance, Legislative and Property Committee. Councillor Budds, please.
Thank you. Tonight, this committee has nothing to report.
Councillor Budds. City Planning and Economic Development. Councillor Dreger.
Nothing on the agenda for this committee this evening.
Thank you. Community Service Committee. Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Community Service Committee has nothing on the agenda tonight.
Thank you. Waterworks Committee. Councillor Dreger for Councillor Wall.
Okay, this evening we have a presentation of the annual report for 2017. I'll just open my file here. The Office of Drinking Water of Manitoba Sustainable Development Department requires an annual public water system report to be submitted and posted publicly online. And once it is accepted by council, the report will be posted on the city's website. Administration has also prepared a 2017 water treatment data report, and these reports are attached here, and I have read them, believe it or not. They're fairly lengthy, so I will not be reading them tonight, but just wanted to draw your attention to some of the subjects that are covered in these reports. The water demand especially was quite interesting, the amount of water that is drawn from the Assiniboine River to be treated. And then also the amount of water that goes back into the Assiniboine River, the raw water quality, distribution system water quality monitoring and analysis. It is a fairly extensive report, and it comes with some very colorful charts and yeah, a lot of information there. The pH levels are included in there, also the chlorine levels, lots of things of interest to the public. And as I was reading through this, I was thinking this should really be submitted to our high schools as well and become part of their science classes. And then also there's the public water system, the 2017 annual report, which is even longer than the other one, but equally as interesting. So I will read the recommendation here, if I can open it. Just a moment. Here it is. It is the administrative recommendation that the Council of the City of Portage la Prairie accept the 2017 Public Water System Annual Report and the 2017 Water Treatment Plant Annual Data Report and forward same to the Manitoba Sustainable Development Office of Drinking Water and authorize administration to post the reports on the city website. And I so move.
Moved by Councillor Dreger and seconded by Councillor Budds. Any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And that concludes Waterworks reports. Councillor Dreger, thank you. Transportation Committee, Councillor Draycott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing for transportation this evening in council.
Thank you. And Public Safety Committee, Councillor Espy.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Okay. Thank you. And Youth Councillor, did you have anything for council?
No, Your Worship. We have nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Appa. We have no deferred business, and we have no old business, and no new business. So council is adjourned at 6:25 p.m. and we're going to move right into committee. Okay, we'll call committee to order at 6:26 p.m. First up is Finance Legislative Property Committee. Councillor Buds, please.
Thank you. Two items up for council's discussion and consideration tonight, and the first being our local vehicles for hire bylaw. And so just a little refresher here. I mean, we've been dealing with our livery bylaw for some time. We've been going back and forth with administration, and it's been something that we needed to deal with. We have reached out to stakeholders and businesses in the community, and based on that, as well as research that administration has completed, there's now the formation of a new bylaw, which we will be bringing forth the next council meeting and for our consideration discussion here again tonight. So it will be called the Local Vehicles for Hire bylaw, and we know that in late 2017 the government enacted a new Local Vehicles for Hire Act to govern the activities of taxis, shuttles, and limousine ride-paying services, and to also include regulations for ride-sharing services. Municipalities that have existing livery bylaws for this purpose can continue to use their bylaw unless they develop a new bylaw in keeping with the new act. So again, we've started this process, and in early 2018 we encouraged the input, as I had mentioned to. I think it's important to note that we have not to date been approached for ride-sharing services, and we are familiar with what those are. That's your Ubers of the world, if you will. However, when proactive enough to incorporate language in our bylaw to deal with that if and when that does occur here in our city. The provincial government and MPIC does allow each municipality latitude to develop its own bylaws and requirements for these ride-paying services, provided it complies with the Act and it sets its own fees. So you can see that there is some proposed changes to our fees and charges there. So annual fees, dispatcher for vehicle for hire, ride-sharing services, licensing is $1,000 for up to 5 vehicles, and fees are applied only in batches of 5 vehicles and prorated within 1 year of commencement. There's a transfer fee, and the current fees of local hire for businesses, drivers, and standard business licenses remain the same. I think we can touch on this a little bit later on, but this is where the crux of it is the fines. And so operating a local vehicle for hire without a valid license is $1,000 per incident, and operating an unregistered vehicle for hire within the state of Portage la Prairie is $1,000 per incident. Operating a local vehicle for hire with an unlicensed driver is $1,000. And so failure to report an accident involving any of their registered vehicles, you can see there's a graduated scale or fine there. And there's also an annual inspection of vehicle signage compliance. So you can see that there's quite a bit of work here, and so I'll be recommending to approve this bylaw. But before I open this up to any other questions from council, I would like to ask a question from administration in terms of what their view is in enforcement. And I think that was some of the biggest concerns that stakeholders had in the community, that while we had bylaws in the past, it was our ability to enforce it. And I still have that same concern in reading the bylaw. I know that we've got our local bylaw enforcement officer in place, but that's been in place and not enforcing our existing bylaw. Where would be the the feeling of comfort from council's perspective that despite we changed the bylaw, the enforcement being any different? Looking for administration's feedback on that.
Mr. Pado?
Absolutely. Through your worship to Councillor Buds. In regards to enforcement, we have a discussion with the RCMP. Before we brought this bylaw to council, we had it reviewed by RCMP for feedback. Currently, our bylaw enforcement doesn't have the right to stop a vehicle in motion to enforce the bylaw. So we would need RCMP's help in imposing this. We've had discussions locally with the detachment, and when we roll out the bylaw, we're going to do education with the RCMP and also ask for them to do a little bit of a blitz and encourage our local taxi driving community to follow the bylaw, make sure they're aware of the bylaw, and basically a bigger commitment from the RCMP to help us enforce this bylaw.
So the RCMP have the ability to stop, and we don't under our bylaw enforcement, but just visual inspections for proper signage, that type of stuff can still be handled by bylaw enforcement or not? Where's the limitations between what bylaw enforcement can do and the RCMP?
Absolutely. So the bylaw can allow the enforcement people can come to an appointment to have their signage inspected as there's an annual inspection. So that being done internally by our bylaw enforcement team. In regards to vehicles that maybe been operating without a license and those types of infractions, that would be handled by the RCMP.
So if the city is aware of a situation or bylaw enforcement becomes aware, we can always report it to the RCMP, I guess. That would be our remedy.
That's correct.
Yeah. That's all I have, all the questions I have, unless there's more from council to my attention, and then obviously probably through to administration. So is there any other questions on that bylaw?
I guess I would ask the question, if somebody suspects that there is a vehicle for hire operating without the required signage or information or licensing, how would we ask the public to address that? Would we ask them to come down to City Hall or make a phone call to City Hall or directly to the RCMP in that state?
Perhaps I would refer that question to Ms. McFarland, Director of Corporate Services, and perhaps she can answer that.
The guidelines to passengers, there is advice given on how the public can report issues with that particular industry to City Hall and also to the RCMP.
So a follow-up to that, will we be making that information available readily to the public? If there's questions, is that information going to be posted easily to find on our website, or?
Our intent would be to publish all of these documents upon final approval of the bylaw on our website. Maybe I can talk loud enough that you can hear. We would also make that information available at City Hall, and I would think that we can also do it at operations. So it'll be very transparent to the public.
Okay, hearing no other questions, I'll be bringing forth that recommendation at our next council meeting. The other item is the establishment of infrastructure general reserve bylaw or fund through bylaw approval. And so just as you know, as we went through our budget process, inclusive of that was creation of an infrastructure general reserve. And we all know, and we're no strangers to the requirements of every municipality to deal with infrastructure. And I know that there's been a great effort put forth for lobbying on behalf of the federal and provincial governments for their share in infrastructure dollars, but we also have our own responsibility. We have millions of dollars of assets in our due care, and so it's our responsibility to continue to invest in those assets. And with the establishment of this fund, we will see on an annual basis funds rolling into this reserve, and then withdrawals from this reserve coming to council for approval. So obviously we want to build this fund up and provide us with an infrastructure reserve account for the future. So that's what I'll be bringing forth, and again, it just falls along with our budget as well as our risk-based approach to capital funding that we are taking on. Any questions? I should note that's not for the utility. This is just for the general side of things.
I'm just wondering, Councillor Budds, if you'd, for my benefit and anyone else listening, explain just what you mean by risk-based analysis.
So that was through the budget process, Councillor Frey. So there was a whole establishment of how we view assets that are under our due control, and we asked management through our whole budget process to look at it a different approach this year. You're not familiar with that?
Yeah, I do remember it. I just thought maybe a little simple explanation would serve well. Am I correct in saying that's a look at all of our assets to see, at what date replacement would probably fall and so on?
I think it's a different approach on viewing it in the sense that we have to view it from the risk of not doing something versus having a list of items that could, from a department area, from an operations lead, say this is something that we need to get done. It's the risk of not doing it is a different type of thinking around it. So I'll be honest with you, a lot of the same priorities came forward, but there was a shift in the priority of those, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Thank you.
If there's no other questions, that does conclude my committee report.
Thank you, Councillor Buds. City Planning and Economic Development Committee, Councillor Dreger, please.
We have one item on the agenda this evening, and that is the February 2018 combined totals from the Portage la Prairie Planning District, and this covers the permits sold in both the city and the RM of Portage la Prairie. The totals for February are 18, bringing the annual total to 29. That's for the first 2 months of the year, compared to last year's total of 22. The value of this year's total is $2,140,565, compared to last year's of $1,666,000 to date, to the end of February. And there's a breakdown there of all the permits that that have gone through that office this last month. So any questions? The other thing that I would also like to mention this evening is just hats off again to the Chamber of Commerce for their Home Expo that happened this last weekend. Hope many of the public were down there to view the different booths. I understand from Councillor Espy, who was there probably most of Friday evening and Saturday, that it was very busy. I did have a chance to walk through as well, and it was just very well presented. A lot of the businesses in town were there, and yeah, so well done. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councillor Dreger. Community Service Committee, Councillor Fraze, please.
Thank you, Worship. Community Service Committee has nothing on the agenda tonight, but we do have the director of PCRC here tonight who asked for some time to present some information about community events. Is that correct, Victoria?
Thank you, Councillor Fraze. I'd just like to mention to Council that the PCRC, in partnership with the Local Immigration Partnership and MCC, are holding an event on April 25th at Stride Place from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. We're holding what's called a Forced to Flee simulation. It focuses on the millions of people in the world who've been displaced from their countries and puts participants in the simulation into some of the situations that they might be facing when they're put in these situations. So we would strongly encourage participation from council. As I did gather some stats from our settlement services, and currently they have over 500 clients and newcomers. They don't have, that's not the total number of newcomers to Portage la Prairie. It would be much more than that. So we do have quite a bit of newcomers to our community, so I think it's really important to kind of understand some of the challenges and barriers that they may have faced in their lifetime. So that, again, is April 25th at Stride Place, and lunch is provided.
Okay, thank you, Victoria.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraze. Councillor Alpa, anything from the Youth Department?
I'm currently partnering with the PCRC with the Touch Truck event, which is coming up on May 24th, so still a whiles away. That's all I'm working on right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Draycott, Transportation.
Thank you, Worship. Nothing for transportation this evening.
Thank you. And Councillor Espy, Public Safety.
Thank you, Worship. The Public Safety Committee has nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, I almost forgot, Waterworks Committee, Councillor Dreger for Councillor Wall.
Big agenda here this evening. Waterworks Committee has nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Well, just before we close, we're going to have question period. So question period for people that haven't been here before, it's a chance to get up and ask information-seeking questions of council, and we will endeavor to answer those questions. Are there any questions this evening?
Evening, Mr. Mayor.
Evening, Mr. Knott.
Councillors.
the question of the taxi bylaw, the bylaw dealing with transportation and so on, I have a question for the council responsible for transportation as well as the Director of Public Safety. What, if any, and who have lobbied you in terms of this, and what was the content of the lobbying?
I have personally not been lobbied on this particular information aside from the presentation that we had previously to council directly.
I was basically just involved with redoing the bylaw, but definitely, again, was not lobbied to do it. As you know, there was a change in the reg, and that's why the new bylaw is coming forward.
Now, I can tell you, Mr. Knott, that over the number of years we've had a number of complaints from users of shuttle services and cab services. We've also had complaints from one operator about other operators, and I don't know if I'd call that lobbying, but the message we were getting is probably a few changes need to be made, and I think there's been a lot of really good work done on this over the past several months, including consultation with parties within the city that operate in those businesses. So I don't know if I'd call it lobbying, but definitely I think those parties were consulted by our administration.
Thank you to all three of you. A question on finance. We know now today that the national debt has reached $1 trillion, which is 1,000 billion, and a billion is 1,000 million. It's crazy. Our national interest payments in Canada is over 20 billion, which is between 20 and 30,000 million dollars a year. Everyone in this town would have to pay $2,000 man, woman, and child in order to cover just 1 year's payment of the interest on the national debt. That's just the national. Then you have the provincial debt, which is about the same equivalent, and we get to municipal debt. What is our municipal debt, and what is the annual payment on our debt?
Who would like to answer that?
I'll refer that to our Director of Corporate Services. I believe she's digging for some paperwork currently.
I would like to just comment that we're not prepared to provide that answer. We can email that out, Mr. Knott, to you, but question period for that specific of a question, I'm sure you can appreciate that we don't have that document right in front of us, so we'll endeavor to give it to you, Mr. Knott.
And that's the appropriate answer, Councillor, that you don't have it and you'll get it to me. Good. And I expect it a few days from now. Good. My follow-up question in terms of finance would be, it's a positive one. I want to give kudos to the chairman of the Finance Committee and Council for keeping the interest rates so low, for trying to get the mill rate down, and it's all very well. But I'm still looking at the actual basic money. And so I'll be looking with interest at the waiting for the information about the actual money that we're paying out in interest each year. Because the second question on that lot is, where is the financial budget, the actual detailed budget? I couldn't find it on the web. Is it available? Or are you waiting for the provincial government to tell you how much you're getting?
So stay tuned. We hope to have our financial plan rolled out with some messaging for public hearings very shortly, which will encompass all the information related to the city's finances. I can let you know, though, that this council and councils before has endeavored as much as possible to reduce the requirement for borrowing for infrastructure spending. So it's not been, and you can see in previous budgets and capital planning that we've tried to really reduce the amount of borrowing and therefore reduce the amount of risk associated with the rising interest rate environment, as I think that's what you're alluding to.
The only other thing I'll add is thank you for the compliment, Mr. Knott. I think that compliment this year also needs to be extended to the Portage School Division School Board. I think they work very hard to come in at a very close to zero spot, and that's a bit of a challenge for them. And We certainly appreciate that, because a lot of times when we come in at zero or close to zero, people stop you on the street and they'll say, well, my taxes went up. And because we collect the taxes for both the city and for the school board, for most people, the bottom line is the bottom line. They don't differentiate between who's collecting the money. So if you bump into any members of the school board, give them that compliment too. I'm sure they'd love to hear it. Any further questions this evening? Well, if not, then committee is adjourned at 6:45 p.m. Thank you for coming out, everybody.